Are we doing the interview now? Go ahead and start.
Welcome to another adventure in the podcast Author Reads. My good friend David Bouche has written a new book called The Cliffs of Palos Verdes. It's a marked advance on the previous things he's written. But first of all, hello, Dave.
Hey, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good to hear.
What I talk about this book is in advance is I mean that your previous books have been just sort of a guy I know named Dave telling a funny story around a campfire about his days exploring the Pacific Northwest.
Right.
This story is more you've adopted a persona to tell a story, and it's very entertaining.
Hey,
First of all, is that true? Do you feel that you've assumed another persona? And what is that persona in this story?
so I definitely agree with you with Tales from Hippie Cove, which was my first book, which is vaguely autobiographical. So I mean that is kind of my voice and my experience. My second book is a collection of short stories, and I did a little of kind of adopting tones and attitudes in that, depending on what story you're reading. But this one is the most, it's a noir private investigator novel. It's set in the current time period, but I tried to kind of give it a 1947 flavor, vibe throughout. It's definitely like an affectation or an homage to that style, and I haven't done that in anything else. And it was a challenge, and it was a lot of fun actually.
How did you adopt this persona? Did you take a class or consciously work on your writing or something?
Yeah, I've always loved that style. Like a lot of, I mean, do you like noir, right?
Yeah.
I think guys our age, that's just a thing that we grew up, and it precedes us, but stuff like Chinatown or more through movies, Chinatown, LA Confidential, living in Los Angeles, also growing up here my whole life, felt like it was a very natural suit of clothes to put on. And right before I started writing, I reread a Raymond Chandler novel and kind of just blew through it real quick just to kind of lubricate the gears a little bit.
What sort of geographic influences are there seen in this book?
I mean, all of the great noir is in LA, right? Um, and so in doing this, do you ever see La La Land?
Yeah.
So our mutual friend Rob Fulks was the location manager for La La Land and picked all those great locations, like the Griffith Observatory and just all the different neat places. And I tried to do a little bit of that with this book to highlight places in LA that I thought were good spots for action to happen, but it's also a little bit of a love letter to Los Angeles, places like the Huntington Gardens and the city of Pasadena and Hollywood, where I lived for 10 years, and, just sort of describing. It's funny, I feel like I need to travel more. I'm running out of things to describe.
Did you take a writing workshop or anything, or a workshop group or something? What was the process by which the book emerged?
Nah, I've never done. I work alone. Way back, in my 20s or something like that, I took a couple creative writing classes. Um, and I've had a few, I talked before, like Jess Winfield gave me some good advice. Rob Fulks, who's written a lot of screenplays, he gave me. Rob gave me a great piece of advice once that always stuck with me was I was writing something and I wrote about two characters sort of like almost getting in a fight or some, like something, and then they kind of back away from it. And Rob kind of stopped me and he said, "Don't ever do that." He said, like, have the conflict, go into the action, like that's what people want. And in real life, most of the time we avoid that, right? Like you don't get into the screaming knockdown, drag out fight or whatever. You kind of observe and kind of back off and live to fight another day. So that was, from way back when. I feel like I had a few mentors who gave me key bits of advice. And if you read this book, you'll see maybe I've taken it too much. Everything is very extreme that happens, right? But I don't skimp on the drama.
One thing I really, really liked about this book, and it's in contradistinction to sort of modern fiction. Have you ever seen the modern movie of Matlock?
I haven't. I haven't.
The premise is that the large pharmaceutical industries have poisoned America, and there is an evil, nebulous, quasi-capitalist
Cabal.
cabal moving behind the
Right.
scenes
Right.
that only the hero can find. And the premise is there's this one character that the truth will set him or her free. And that once the plot is unveiled, all will be right with the world.
Right.
I like that your story has some of those tropes, but ultimately the story is not capitalist America is manipulating us and the truth shall set us free. You sort of separate that story from the story you're telling. Thus, you are not sort of dependent upon the great revelation to change my life. And I go, oh my God, Dave's right. I've lived a lie all my life.
And you may have, but not, not in terms of my book or
Your book is not designed to convince me the truth shall set me free.
yeah, I think almost the opposite. Like my take on kind of the noir world is that nothing is completely good and nothing is completely bad, right? Like it's always you're kind of left with this moral grayness that you're trying to navigate, where some things are clearly bad and there's some people that are trying to do good things, but even the good guys have got their vices, and maybe even the evil person, you can kind of understand why they're evil, but it doesn't wrap everything up with a nice, you know, moralistic ending.
Were you conscious of that fact as you were putting together the plot?
I don't. It's funny because it sounds very pretentious or whatever, but it's kind of like the plot just for me. It just kind of comes the way it comes. Like I have basic ideas, basic beats, and things that I think of. Like, and I don't want to give a spoiler, but this sort of big ending in the book, and so I have that image. But then, as you write, I do feel like there's some truth to the idea that your mind kind of cogitates on things in the background, the creative process. And so then, the actual writing of something, I write maybe a page a day in the morning before work. So at that pace, you don't need to see that far down the road, right? So you kind of
Yeah.
here's the scene I'm working on. I'll work on it. I kind of know this has got to happen. And then in the middle of the day or some other day, it'll be like, oh, wait, I could do this. Like, yeah, that's a good. And it just sort of presents itself. So I know there's other people who talk about they map the whole thing out. And I think that's cool too. That's just never been the way it's worked for me.
In some ways, this book is kind of a quest. It's a series of events, and what propels the story in some ways is your sort of skills as writing small vignettes and smaller characters who contribute to the larger story.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too. Have you ever read Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut?
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, that one, it's got something like 97 chapters in it or something. Like it's like each page is a chapter. Um, and then each little page is its own scene. And then it's almost like at the end of every one, there's a little punchline. So like each one kind of reads as its own, it has its own arc. Each chapter, each page that you read, or maybe a page and a half is as long as they are, is its own little self-contained world with a little punchline at the end. I tried to do that with this, or that's kind of the way it came out, and then towards the end of the book, as you're saying, things are getting more and more intense. And it sort of just became one continuous stream of action. Like it starts just moving faster and this is happening and that's happening. And that was kind of fun too. Makes it easy to write, when it's like, and then this happened, and then just kind of get pulled along. You want to hear a little bit?
Sure.
So I'm going to read two parts. I'll read the beginning. So this is the opening of the book, and all the titles are locations. So this chapter is called Whitley Heights, is where I used to live in Hollywood, and that's where Jake's office is. And then I'm going to cut to another scene, and I'll describe that later. I was about to call it a day. Ordiners for a few drinks and some desultory flirting with the red-headed waitress. Dinner from a street vendor on Las Palmas, and back, asleep on the couch with 3 fingers of Jack balanced on my lap by 1 a.m. It was mid-July. The late afternoon breeze through the open window was like a blow dryer, and the sounds of disappointed tourists on Hollywood Boulevard mixed with the staccato bleat of an unattended car alarm. I hadn't worked since June. A nasty divorce case in Culver City. Stakeouts at mid-rate hotels, long-distance photography, a little forensic accounting. Sadly, the bread and butter of my profession. I tripped down the well-traveled path of how did I end up here, was broken by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. A silhouette partially obscured the block lettering on the frosted glass reading, Jacob Cutter, private investigator. The knock was soft, full of second thoughts. I'd seen this before, people unsure why they were here, what they were doing. The door opened on an elderly man. He was dressed up in an old guy way. Chinos, a collared shirt and a tie, orthopedic shoes that matched his windbreaker. He reminded me of my dad, who'd passed away last year. Are you Mr. Cutter? He asked. One and the same. Please, call me Jake, I replied, waving him in towards the chair opposite my desk. He sat and took a quick look around. He usually had a privacy screen in place that blocked the couch, the TV, the makeshift kitchen that comprised the apartment half of the room. It was trash day, so fortunately I cleared a lot of the empty bottles earlier this morning, but still, not a great look for someone who was already on the fence about enlisting my services. What brings you this evening, Mr. I asked. Armstrong, Alan Armstrong, he replied, reflexively rising and offering me his hand. I don't know quite where to start, he said haltingly, looking around at nothing, brushing the worn crease of his trousers. Just start where it starts, I replied. He took a deep breath. There were the beginnings of tears in his eyes. He wiped them away and shook his head, trying to force some composure over his emotions. Looking up finally, his red, watery eyes met mine. She didn't kill herself. There's no way it was suicide. I refuse to believe that, and I need you to help me prove it. Who is she? My granddaughter, Rebecca Armstrong. The story came in fits and starts. She was an academic champion, summa cum laude at the Biologic Life Sciences at Caltech, a rising star at a cutting-edge R&D company in Pasadena. Full of life, world at her fingertips, that sort of thing. And then out of the blue, she jumps off a cliff in Palos Verdes. No note, no warning, no closure for her friends or family. Is there anything you can think of that might have triggered a change? I told you I don't think it was suicide. I understand, Mr. Armstrong. I'm just asking questions. That's what I do. I'm sorry, he said, raising both hands in surrender. I went through this with the cops so many times. One last time for me, I asked. He nodded a little weary, resigned. She'd recently broken up with her boyfriend. They'd been together several months. From what I understand, she broke it off with him. You mentioned the police. What did they think? It was a state park, the cliff she jumped from. There was a fixed camera that recorded it all. She parks her car on the edge of the road. She climbs over the small fence and then goes across the bluff and over the cliff. There's no one else on the video? Just her. Toxicology? Clean, nothing at all. It took a few seconds. There was no easy way, so I just came out with it. From what you've told me, it sounds like suicide. Don't you think I know that? He asked, almost pleading. It was clear he'd had this conversation before several times. I'm telling you, it's wrong. It's all wrong. I know how it looks, but you have to trust me. Not this, not her. It was quiet for a few seconds, his declaration hanging in the air. Through the window, I heard an argument over a parking place. The hot, dry breeze rustled the blinds, softly tapping them against the glass. I thought about this poor guy hanging his hopes on something that almost certainly wasn't so. I thought about a pile of unpaid bills in the desk drawer. The argument outside came to a close with a burst of profanity and the squeal of car tires. It's $500 a day plus expenses. I'll check in with you at the end of the week.
Very good.
Thank you.
I like that a lot.
Thanks, Dan.
You jump right into it, and there you are.
All right. This one isn't as long as the other one, so just a little prep. So Rebecca worked at a company called Biozine, and it's an R&D company in Pasadena. And as he looks into it, there's sort of some suspicious stuff about this Jethro Jet Molokai, who's this super powerful scientist that was working on this new drug, and Rebecca was mixed up in it. And maybe it's leading somewhere. So Jake decides to head out to Pasadena from Hollywood, and he's out following up on leads, and he decides to just see if he can pop by Biozine. Half an hour later, tanked up on coffee and diner grease, I decided to check out Biozine. It was 8:30. Most of the staff would be gone for the day. I didn't really know what I was looking to find. It's not like I could show up in the lobby and start asking questions about a suicide that was looking more and more like what? There were lots of interesting pieces, but how did they add up to a young woman, her life just beginning, jumping off the cliff with a smile on her face? The campus was north of the city, tucked up against the foothills of the San Gabriels. As I approached, the residential feel faded. There were private property signs and a wall of trees obscuring a 12-foot security fence. The road ended at a guard shack with a lowered metal crossbar. It looked more like a military base than a biotech company. I pulled an old road map out of the glove box and came to a stop at the gate. I could see the campus in the distance, long, sleek buildings, stylish tables, and landscaping in the courtyards, the futuristic logo in soft blue hovering above it all. How can I help you, sir? Asked the guard on duty. He was big, crew cut, straight out of a Marine recruitment poster. Am I anywhere near Huntington Gardens? I asked, waving the road map as a prop. I've been driving around for half an hour. He got up and came out of the guard shack, clean cut, vaguely menacing, like a preppy guy from the wrestling team who kicked your ass in high school. I noted that he wore a sidearm. What kind of biotech company has armed guards? He looked me up and down, saying nothing for an awkward amount of time. I kept smiling like some rube who'd just fallen off the turnip truck. Nothing to see here. You know, you can get maps and directions on your phone these days, he said. I know, I laughed, raising both hands, totally in character. I need to get with the times. I have to think it's closed, he said after another painful silence. Yes, I'm sure it is, I replied, laughing in a good-natured way. I'm a historian from the University of Iowa. We're holding a conference. There's an evening tour and reception of the grounds. I hear it's a beautiful location. Yeah, real nice, he replied. It's across the valley, that way, he said, pointing back the way I'd come. Well, that explains it, I said, laughing, in the befuddled manner of an egghead who doesn't know how to use a phone and gets lost anytime he strays from Iowa City. I've been driving around forever, I added. I don't suppose I could use one of your restrooms inside. I'll be in and out in a minute. I'm sorry, but we can't help you, sir, he answered, suspicions rekindled. No problem. I saw a service station down the road. Thanks for the directions. Hopefully I can still make the tour, I said, smiling and shifting into reverse. He didn't respond. It was like I was talking to Mount Rushmore. I pulled away and headed back towards LA. In the rear view, I saw him watching me and taking a photo. He was recording my plate number.
Very nice.
Thank you, Dan.
I can picture like driving up to JPL and going, is this the Huntington? And so,
I like the idea that he still has a roadmap in his glove box. He drives a 1962 MG, so a lot of his stuff that he's got is kind of old timey. He's got an old timey car, and so
yeah, it's an added layer that rings true.
Oh, I'm glad you felt that way.
I've been talking to Dave Bouche, whose recent book is Cliffs of Palos Verdes. Where can people get it?
It's on Amazon. Just look up the Cliffs.
Okay.
Or look up my name, David Bouche, Bueche. I've got 3 books now. So read that one, read the other ones, read them all.
Collect the set.
There you go.
Okay. Do you have another book in the pipeline?
Well, did you kind of catch at the end of Cliffs of Palos Verdes that it was sort of things were murky enough that maybe there's more to come?
Yes.
Yeah, it definitely left the door open for a sequel. I'm not going to do a sequel right now. I'm going to write something else, but I could see coming back to it at a later date. Right now, I'm thinking about a book that all takes place in one house in the San Fernando Valley and over multiple decades of different people living. It's a rental house, different people living, and you sort of are getting a series of kind of novellas, little stories about different, like one of the then the different decades that you're seeing. You're kind of getting maybe a little bit of a lens of what's going on in the United States and the culture at that time. So,
is it Reseda or Woodland Hills?
Reseda, yeah, that's where I grew up.
Okay.
Yeah, and Reseda makes an appearance in Cliffs of Palos Verdes, right?
Right?
Yeah, very Dickensian.
Yes. So you're not talking the high end of the San Fernando Valley. It's more sort of the flatlands. What I think of is
it's an interesting place, right? Because it was never the high end of anything, right? But it's sort of right in the middle of the San Fernando Valley. And if you look at when it started, like my dad moved out to Reseda because he said he lived in Chicago. He read an article about this new city that was being chartered, and he read about Reseda. It's like, I want to move there. That sounds like a great place to live. So, it was one thing back in the 50s. One of the interesting things about it now is if you look at neighborhoods in Los Angeles, the just sort of neighborhood tracks, it's the most integrated part of the city of Los Angeles in terms of demographics. Yeah, you have sort of legacy white people who live there. There's a big Indian population. There's a Hispanic population. And there's this bar that I go to sometimes about once a month near my old house where I grew up called the Copper Bucket, which also appears in the Cliffs of Palos Verdes and is going to be a common locale in my new book where you see even some of the characters maybe kind of cross paths with each other. And you can go there and, I'll go there and waves of people like you sort of like white folks who come in that have probably been going there for 35 years. There's a whole group of Hispanic people who come in and kind of they take over the jukebox for a while. College kids come in because it's a dive bar. So to me, it's a very interesting place. Like it's easy to kind of look down your nose at the valley, and God knows I understand why. But I don't know. There's an energy there, and there's a kind of a mixing there that I think you don't get in West LA and other parts of LA. I sort of describe it a little bit in the Cliffs of Palos Verdes when they're driving down the street that they rent an Airbnb in Reseda and stay there. And he says, we're going to go hide out in the one place in Los Angeles no one ever would think to look for us. She says, where? He says, the San Fernando Valley. It's like, you're in LA. Like it's
And
just,
then you think of that part of the San Fernando Valley.
that's the most hidden part, right? So, but there's a scene where they drive down the street, and I'm describing like one house is falling apart. One house has a gentrification fence and like LED lighting. One house is somewhere in between, and you really see that a lot.
Yes.
I mean, this kind of slow motion cycle of new people are moving in and doing the property, but then usually the one with the really running, falling apart, you might see the guy taking his trash out and he's 80 years old and he's lived there since 1962 or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's a nice mix of lots of different time periods, kind of all jammed together too. The one last thing, the copper bucket over behind the bar, there's this, it's very easy to miss it too. And then once you see it, it's like, oh my God, this is great. Someone back in the 50s, when it opened in like 1952, with a wood burner, you can do, if you're good with a wood burner, you can do almost like charcoal drawings, like shading you can do
Yeah.
on wood. There's a diorama that runs the entire length of the bar, which is long, and it's all pictures of like 50s clothing because that's when it was made. Women in poodle skirts, and like the guy is there drinking, and he's got a little skinny black tie and a white shirt, and she's got a frying pan, and she's come into the bar to like chase him out. And another guy, and he's holding forth, and everyone's sitting like, oh God, and I said, who are these people? I said, those were all the customers back in the 50s. And they kind of worked them into this big varnished diorama that's now like 70 years old. It's really like a great little work of art.
Well, Dave, thanks so much for taking time of your day to talk to me.
Dan, it is always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend.
We share a valley background. That was my January 2026 interview with Dave Bouche, reading from his recent book, Cliffs of Palos Verdes. If you have a poem or a short story or an excerpt you want to put out there, give me a call or write djng at earthlink.net, and we'll see about getting you on here. But until that time, bye bye.